Late last year, my husband broke a bone and had to go to rehab once every week for quite some time thereafter. Since we both worked, this left us with very little time to spend together, just the two of us. This made me feel increasingly lonely, and to make matters worse for me, his attitude was getting colder and more distant. More often than not, his responses either became consisted of a single word, or his tone would be the baritone version of me disappointing a 12-year-old child after I took away his PS5 privileges. Life was not going great, if I'm going to be honest, and one day, I got a call from the hospital while I was at work. They told me that my husband had slipped and fallen from a pedestrian bridge over a road and became badly injured as he fell in an unfortunate way down the steps. I rushed to the hospital and entered the room where my husband was resting, but the doctor, who came in a hurry, told me something that I just could not believe. Excuse me? After hearing more details, I quickly ran out of the hospital room in pursuit of someone who would definitely shed light on the subject. This is the story of how I was nearly taken into police custody by being wrongly accused of something that my husband was responsible for, and how the situation thereafter left him completely abandoned by everyone he thought he could trust as a result of his own heinous actions. My name is Cressida Alberg, and I'm a 28-year-old office worker. I have been married for 2 years to my husband, Henrik, a classmate of mine from college. We unfortunately had no children when the story begins, but as we will see, perhaps that was best for both of us. Henrik is of Norwegian descent, with his father, Anders Aberg, being the youngest son of a Norwegian family of lumberjacks turned landscape designers. After marrying Henrik's mother, Hannah, Anders left his country to live with her in her hometown of Lewiston, Maine. Henrik is bilingual in English and Norwegian, and he worked as, wouldn't you know it, a freelance landscape designer for people looking to build a house in the suburbs of Portland, Maine. While a freelancer, he took his job very seriously and made sure the design was perfect for his clients' needs, and what with the current development of a new luxury section in town, he was in high demand and was making frankly astonishing amounts of money. As I mentioned, I met him in college, and I was captivated by his looks and his charm. He was a very funny guy with a beautiful smile, and while we were dating, he cared about me very passionately. That, in of itself, was something totally new to me, and it made me feel very secure. You see, I don't like to admit this, but I'm an orphan. My parents both died in a plane crash when I was very young, so Henrik was quite literally the only person I could call family, and I had hoped to welcome a new family member as soon as possible, but that was not the case at the moment. The reason was simple. Henrik had gotten seriously injured last year. Last December, he suddenly started skiing, and even though he was still a beginner, he went on to attempt skiing down the course for advanced skiers. As a result, he broke his strong arm. The doctor said it would take 5 months to heal completely, and 6 months thereafter, he was still going to rehabilitation. My husband had a tendency to act in the spur of the moment, so it was not unusual for him to make very costly mistakes like this. That was why I was always on the edge of my seat with every passing day. There was no telling when he would go berserk and do something stupid again. When I got the call that he had broken his arm, I was surprised, but I was very glad that it was not a life-threatening injury. And as I mentioned, he was still going to rehab once a week, 6 months later. Shall I take you to the hospital today?
No, that's okay. Gotta keep the calories burning somehow. I can walk. I can go by myself.
Henrik said as he left for rehabilitation by himself again one Saturday afternoon. Whenever I tried to take him to the hospital, he always refused. Since Henrik went to the hospital every Saturday afternoon like this, we inevitably spent less and less time together. Weekdays are busy days for both of us, so there was no time for us to relax. And since he slept until late afternoon on weekends, we never had a good conversation anymore, let alone go out together. I used to try to get the two of us to sit at the table together for dinner at least, but even that became an impossibility. This lack of spending time with my husband, who I loved very much, made me begin to feel increasingly lonely because I felt I was losing the only family I had left. One Sunday, as usual, Henrik woke up in the evening, strode into the kitchen, grabbed a bagel, and turned on the TV. I spoke to him. "Hey, we haven't been spending much time together lately, have we?"
You think so? I think we spend plenty of time together, if I'm honest.
He replied absentmindedly, without ever taking his eyes off the TV. "No, we have not. You're at the hospital every Saturday afternoon, and we're both working late on weekdays these days. You're pretty much become a night owl at this point."
It can't be helped, Cressida.
"Oh, honey, please don't say that. Let's get off work early and have dinner together again, like before, at least." As I said this, he turned off the TV and turned around to look at me. I initially felt relieved that he was finally willing to have a serious talk with me, but then he snapped.
It doesn't frickin' matter. I resent you being so picky over something small like that. In case you don't remember, I can't use my right hand very well because of that accident. So it takes me a long time to do my work. Do you realize how hard it is to draw the perfect plan of people's lawns using my left hand? Even now, 6 months later, it still takes me maybe twice as long as usual to make the high-quality designs I promised my clients. I suggest you don't say whatever you want without considering my own convenience, all right?
"I'm sorry." When I apologized, he flared his nose and strode to the bathroom, as if he was running away, without saying anything more. I wondered if he really needed to be so cold to me. I felt that my husband had become colder and more distant lately, and I was left in the living room, alone with my thoughts. Henrik was right. It was true that he had broken his arm, and perhaps I had severely lacked in consideration for his predicament. I never had broken a bone myself, and I couldn't imagine a situation where I was forced to use my weak hand to complete a series of precise, artistic tasks while enduring constant pain. With that in mind, I decided not to talk about it to Henrik anymore. Instead, I started to think about how I could be more proactive in discussing how we could get our time back together. But at that time, how could I have known what was awaiting me in a few weeks' time? After his little outburst, Henrik's attitude became even more senile and sinister than before. "Rehab today, huh?"
Yep.
"Do you really dress so well to go to the hospital?"
No, I don't. This is completely normal. What's it to you anyways?
He began to treat me in such an ill manner as such. My loneliness grew, but I told myself that now was the time to be patient and concentrate on my work. You know what they say, all good things come to those who wait. I convinced myself if I waited long enough, Henrik would eventually return to his old charming self, the same man who I fell for. After a few weeks of living like this, one drizzly evening, I gave up on going home because of unexpectedly heavy rain and was hoping to work overtime until the rain calmed down when I received a call on my phone.
Hello, this is Dr. Lombardo of Maine Medical Center. Is this the number of one Miss Cressida Aberg?
Yes, it is. And what can I do for you, doctor? It was the same hospital where Henrik went for his rehab sessions.
I contacted you because it was written as an emergency contact on Mr. Henrik Aberg's driver's license.
With this one sentence, I knew what was going on. It must be an urgent case because the hospital called Henrik's emergency contact. I asked Dr. Lombardo the details, and he told me that Henrik had slipped on the steps of a pedestrian bridge on his way home and fallen down the stairs. It seemed he was hit in the wrong place and was in a serious condition, requiring surgery. I left the office in a hurry and jumped into a cab. Maine Medical Center was about a 20-minute drive away, but due to the heavy rain and resulting traffic, I was only able to get inside the hospital after an hour. The receptionist told me where the hospital room was, and when I opened the door, there was my husband sleeping peacefully. Just as I rushed to Henrik's side, the door to the hospital room opened again. I turned around and saw an experienced doctor in a white coat with equally white hair standing there. His name tag read Dr. George Lombardo, and his eyes strangely looked like he had just witnessed a mischievous child puncture a hole in his Mercedes tire. And when I lightly bade him good evening, he narrowed his eyes further and said something that left me completely dumbfounded.
You must go home right now.
I was so surprised at the abruptness and unexpectedness of his words that I couldn't help but let out a loud gasp. "Excuse me, doctor? What do you mean by—" I asked, and again he said something I didn't understand whatsoever.
There's been a mistake in contacting you. You ought to be removed from the building. The emergency contact information on your driver's license had not changed. I'd only remembered too late who you really were.
As I remained silent, struggling to understand, the doctor continued.
You're Henrik's ex-wife, the one who's pressuring him to pay you alimony, are you not?
What the? Dr. Lombardo's tone became more austere, slightly growling.
Enough games, Miss Power. I know every little detail there is to know about the kind of insane woman that you are.
The doctor was downright accusing me of being clinically insane now. What in the world did I say in that phone call that made him think I was batshit crazy? I tried not to express my shock as I replied. Doctor, I haven't the slightest idea what you're talking about. I believe you're mistaken in some way. I couldn't help but indirectly ask him why he thought of me as a crazy woman. And the next sentence he said was something that somehow made me even more discombobulated. Never in my entire life did I doubt what my ears channeled to my brain. But in this instance, I thought I had really gone insane.
I'm asking you to stop stalking poor Henry at this difficult time.
Wait, what? What are you? I am not a stalker, Dr. Lombardo.
Just get yourself home. Please don't make me resort to extreme measures to have you removed from the building.
No matter how much I tried to explain myself, he wouldn't listen to me at all and kept accusing me of complete and utter bullshit. Struggling to find my footing in this desperate situation, in the middle of the argument, a nurse came into the room. Anything wrong, Dad? At the sound of her voice, Dr. Lombardo turned around and replied,
Talia, dear, this woman is a stalker you've been talking about, dear. You stay out of this room. You let your dad take care of this.
And the nurse, her face white with panic, backed away and essentially scampered out of the room. If she had a tail of some sort, it would be between her legs in cowardice, for sure. I was trying to wrap my head around all this nonsense. I could barely comprehend that the nurse was named Talia, and that she was Dr. Lombardo's daughter, and that she was calling me a stalker. At that moment, I was filled with anger towards the nurse. I quickly rushed out of the hospital room and chased after her, convinced that this Talia knew something about this whole fiasco. Whoa there, wait up. The nurse, who was walking quickly down the hallway, stopped dead in her tracks at my words. I asked her, why are you calling me a stalker? The nurse's eyes widened in genuine shock. You might as well be a frickin' stalker for coming all the way here, regardless of how I could ruin your reputation for harassing my darling Henrik like this. Wait, excuse me? Back up a bit. My darling Henrik? What the hell do you mean? I think that brain of yours can understand what I mean by that, Miss Power. Henrik is my husband. Do the nonsense have any bounds? Wait a second. You're married to Henrik. You're talking about Henrik Alberg, correct? Yes. Now get out of his life. You've given him enough trouble as it is. But Henrik is my husband. Enough lies. We registered our marriage together 2 weeks ago, and I even saw the divorce papers being processed right then too. He submitted them right before we submitted our own documents. My vision went kaput. First obvious question. When in the world did I sign any divorce documents? Second obvious question. Why am I discovering that Henrik was also married to this nurse? Third obvious question. Had I been betrayed by the only family I had ever known? There were too many damn questions reigning within my mind, and who knows how long I stood there before the nurse, staring at the raindrops running down the glass at the windows. Dr. Lombardo's words, echoing in the hall, brought me back to myself. He was urging me and his daughter to come back to Henrik's room, where he was waiting with his arms crossed. I made a desperate plea to him. I swear on my life, career, and sanity, Dr. Lombardo, that I am not divorced from Henrik. Your daughter seems to have misunderstood something.
What are you talking about? Henrik came to our house to ask for our blessing to marry our Talia, and he showed me the divorce papers at that time, and I've heard so much about you too. He explained everything to me in detail so that there would be no misunderstandings, and not only make Henrik out to be a really nice young man.
Blessing to marry? Talia? No. This can't be.
Listen, you can't keep hanging around your ex-husband like this after a divorce. This is your final warning. If you don't leave right now and continue to bother him in his marriage to Talia, I will take appropriate measures.
I desperately resisted against the doctor's words. Please, Wait a moment. I am not divorced. I swear.
You have nothing to prove what you say.
The doctor glared at me without blinking, and his daughter next to him swallowed hard. I endured their stares and thought desperately, I've got it. They'll know what to do. I can prove that we are not divorced. His parents live just around the corner. Please give me a moment. I'll call them now. I pleaded, but they both scoffed at me, as if they were convinced I was lying.
How can you call them when Henrik's parents have already passed on?
It took all my willpower to ignore them and call my parents-in-law. They didn't pick up, so I left them a very urgent message. Please, please, please answer me right away. The ticking of the clock echoed throughout the hospital room. Dr. Lombardo and his daughter looked at each other with triumphant eyes and said,
Come on now. Admit defeat and cease this charade, Miss Power.
And that's when it happened.
Sorry for making you wait, Cressida. No time to reply. We come running out to find you in the hospital.
And what the hell do you mean they think you're divorced? Anders, Hannah, thank goodness. I burst into tears of relief. George and Talia Lombardo stood frozen, eyes wide open. Then my father-in-law talked to the doctor to clear up the misunderstanding, as my mother-in-law gently rubbed my trembling back.
So, those divorce papers.
No, it can't be true. Right when the misunderstanding was cleared up, and my tears moved to Talia's eyes, my husband woke up to the commotion.
Oh my God.
The sight that came into his vision the moment he regained consciousness was perhaps too much for him to comprehend. Father and daughter immediately rushed over to him, bombarding him with difficult questions.
No, you got it all wrong.
He just mumbled and mumbled to no end. I was so disgusted by this pathetic side of him that my love for him had completely cooled off. After I dried my tears, I went on to say, That's enough for today. It seems that we have cleared up the misunderstanding between us, and that's what's important to me, so let's talk about it at a later time. I left the room with my parents-in-law. The next day, we gathered again in the hospital reception room. I didn't want to come to the hospital anymore because of the sheer amount of bad memories I had already made there, but since Henrik was still hospitalized, we really had no alternative. Henrik sat in a chair at the head of a table, with my parents-in-law, myself, Dr. Lombardo, and Talia all sitting around to face him. He began to tell us everything with a downcast look on his face.
As you know, I had a skiing injury last year, and Talia was in charge of my rehabilitation.
I'd forgotten most of the story because it was so painful to listen to, but here's a summary of the important points. Henrik approached Talia, ostensibly out of a sense of destiny, but he was really just after her for her father's money. Dr. Lombardo was also head of the rehabilitation medicine ward. To keep his relationship with Talia, and thus with Dr. Lombardo's money alive, he forged divorce papers and got married quickly. He even showed her my picture in advance so that he could make an excuse if she saw me with him, claiming that he and I were in a legal battle about settling alimony. That was why father and daughter recognized my face and treated me as a liability to their happiness. Henrik was planning to leave me as soon as possible after our relationship deteriorated. That would indeed explain my husband's recent cold shoulder. And 2 weeks prior, indeed, was the day I asked him why he was going to the hospital so dressed up. On that day, my husband went not to the hospital, but to Talia's parents' house to greet them and ask them for their blessing to marry their daughter. On the same day, he submitted the forged divorce papers and the marriage certificate to the nurse. Rehab had long been finished. I felt like all the discomfort I've been feeling lately was connected by a single line that was now all too obvious. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I was silently staring at my husband with deadened eyes. But in contrast to me, Dr. Lombardo exploded in fury.
Forging divorce documents? Do not underestimate my minor-in-law, my good fellow. And I can confidently tell you that that's a federal crime. I ought to report you to the cops. No, please, anything but that. Please forgive me. I'm getting a divorce soon from now on anyway. What are you talking about? Enough out of you, son. This is unforgivable.
Anders slap-struck Henrik's cheek, while Dr. Lombardo called the police on the spot.
I'm sorry about everything, Miss Cressida. I caused you great discomfort yesterday, and I feel so ashamed.
I'm so sorry, too. I had no idea of Henrik's plan, and I had no right to call you the things I did. I feel terrible. Kind of ironic how it was people other than Henrik who apologized to me. But I guess they were victims too, in a sense. Victims to Henrik's heinous ploy. It was all his fault, and while they did indeed cause me lots of discomfort the previous evening, they had good reason to, or so it seemed, as they had been deceived by Henrik's lies. I turned to Anders and Hannah. Of course, I'll be divorcing him, unfortunately. That's all I said. And Dr. Lombardo added,
Of course, I cannot allow my lovely young daughter to marry a young man willing to lie to his own family to marry her. You must forgive me, Mr. and Mrs. Auberg, for being harsh. Not at all, sir. Oh no, please forgive me.
Henrik kept on pleading desperately, but no one was there to help him. Soon after, police officers who had been called to the scene rushed to the hospital and went on to interview each of us in different rooms, and then the day was over. After questioning, 2 charges of bigamy and document falsification were made against him, and Henrik was arrested on the day he was discharged from the hospital. He had falsified the divorce papers, which invalidated our sham divorce, and for some time, he was married to both me and Talia Lombardo. I refiled for divorce to resolve the bigamy, and then, of course, Talia filed for divorce from her husband as well. As a result of the trial, Henrik was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, with a 3-year suspended sentence. I had no sympathy for him and demanded alimony through my lawyer. The lawyer told me that the standard amount of alimony was about $30,000, so I asked for that very amount. Anders and Hannah came to apologize to me again and paid the fee in one lump sum on their now disowned son's behalf. Apparently, Talia was also demanding alimony, and they were in financial trouble after paying her as well. Since my in-laws are innocent in this matter, I want that bastard to quickly return the money to them as soon as possible. Considering how well he was doing for himself before this whole thing started, I don't think that this would be much of a problem, which is good to know. As for me, I moved out as quickly as I could before Henrik ever got out of the hospital, and now I'm living alone in an apartment near my workplace. The reason I was able to start a new life so quickly is probably because I didn't have any children. A son or a daughter would have made things a lot more difficult for sure. Now I think this is the only silver lining in this admittedly tragic story. I'm not going to be married for a while because of this incident, but I'm going to enjoy my new life as much as I can. Wish me luck.